And we're live. Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Jared.
Perfect. So you have an Australian accent, but you're actually on the opposite side of the world in Berlin, I believe.
Yes.
Um, we're very happy to have you here with us at Pride in the Living Room, Jewmos edition. And a quick reminder to those who are just joining us. So Pride in the Living Room was founded by the Israeli LGBT task force, Agudah, in memory of the 2009 Tel Aviv Gay Center shooting and the Jerusalem Pride Parade stabbing in 2015. And Ha'agudah founded this project to offer a stage and a voice for LGBT Jews from around the world to share their stories, to encourage empathy and community. And all of that said, it is my pleasure to welcome Ben to the stage. Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jared. It's a great opportunity, and I actually think, in spite of all the chaos of 2020, it's rendered distances between us meaningless and has been bringing people together, which is fantastic. So I'm very grateful. Um, it's also interesting having to compose my thoughts today because my Jewish identity and my queer identity have always been interconnected, but when actually trying to look back through a specific lens of how they relate to each other, and thinking of the various milestones through my life to, I guess, where I am now, speaking to you, there have been some pretty poignant, I guess, episodes where they are. It is about their interaction, how they relate to each other. So I thank you for this chance, because I sat down yesterday evening and thought, oh wow, they really are. They're connected, which is it was a real joy, actually, just to sit back and go, oh, okay, it's an interesting way of thinking about it. I made a few notes just to prepare. But really, it's, I think, for me at least, being queer and being Jewish, it definitely, I suppose, reconciliation starts from within. It extends to your loved ones, the ones who you enter the world and you're associated with, your family. It then extends to your significant other, the people who you choose to travel through life with. And then, to me, it extends even further into your community, be it religious or geographical. So it sort of starts from within and emanates out. And I was able to actually peg moments through my development which were about touching on each of those dimensions. I did, as just to entertain myself, wonder when was the first moment I actually had recognized that something was a little bit different. And I remember cleaning out my bedroom before I left Melbourne to go to Berlin last year in June. And I managed to, thanks to my lovely mother, who is a hoarder, but lovingly so, had kept my school diaries from when I was 5 or 6 years old. So prep, grade 1, grade 2. And I remember looking through one of the diary entries and saw a depiction of my sister and I going to a Passover meal, and that I was quite excited for it. And so I was 6 at the time, my sister would have been 3, and I had drawn her with long blonde hair and a purple dress, and I had drawn me with long red hair and a green dress. So it was quite funny looking at that and thinking, oh, okay, something must have been sort of, I had been thinking and maybe not quite, how should I say, something was sort of ticking away for a while, probably before I was able to even articulate it. My queer identity lay largely dormant through my secondary school years. I went to work when I was in year 7 for a few months, and someone at work who is my age touched me on my leg inappropriately. I mean, it was fairly harmless, but I was at the time shocked, but I wasn't quite sure whether I was shocked because he did it or whether I kind of enjoyed it. I think what ensued was a little bit of a head spin where I began questioning. My parents sent me to a psychiatrist who analyzed and dissected, and then brought my parents in at the end of our run of sessions and said, Ben is normal. There's nothing wrong with him. So my first, I mean, it probably sounds a bit more damaging than what it was. I don't think I even took any notice of it at the time, but to think that equating heterosexual with normal was something, I guess, that a lot of us probably have to try to unlearn as we come into our own. But I suppose much of my time at school, I guess because I was so distracted by learning and studying and being with my friends, I didn't think too much of it. I remember just before my bar mitzvah at Melbourne Central, after my parents and I had done shopping, I think this was a few weeks before I was being called up, and I thought, oh, I'm becoming a young Jewish adult. I have to be honest with my parents. And I pulled them inside at 13 years of age and said to them, I'm bisexual. And I mean, two things. First of all, I'm totally all for existence and visibility of bisexuality. But for me, at least, I think that was at that time a way for me to maybe soften the blow to my parents. Of course, my parents said, "No, you don't be ridiculous. It's a phase. You don't know unless you tried. So go and try. Let it wash over you." So for probably a good 5 to 6 years of my schooling years, I distracted myself. I had crushes on boys, but I had crushes on girls as well. But then really after school, because I suppose I was a little bit of a late bloomer, that's when it really kicked off. So for me, my first sort of real turning point was actually when I visited Israel. And that was really, as I said, the first stage towards reconciling the queer identity and the Jewish identity within. My dad he's an Israeli. He moved to Australia in 1963 with his family. Grew up in Haifa, spent 15 years there, and then came here to be with the rest of his extended family. So growing up, knowing it was the homeland of my father and the spiritual homeland of all the Jews, and having that taught to us repeatedly for the 13 years at school, I suppose I had built it up, I guess, as any young Jewish teenager would. So I went 2005, I was 19, to visit some of my friends on the kibbutzim. I think most of them had just finished school just like me, and they were doing, I think, an extension of the Machanim program as part of Habonim Dror. And I spent a month in Israel. And then I spent another month in Israel several years later, I think maybe when I was 22 and 23. And with both of those visits, I left feeling kind of deflated. It didn't quite resonate with me the way I thought it would. I think partially because I suppose as a Jew growing up in the diaspora, you get used to life and culture in the diaspora, and Israel always being away from you. But when I was there walking through the streets and trying to spark some kind of semblance of what I thought I should have been feeling. It was nowhere to be found. I could appreciate the architecture and could connect with my with my father's relatives who had remained in Haifa, but it didn't really speak to me the way I thought it would. By contrast, the second time after I'd visited Israel, I went to Paris for a week, and I visited the Marais district, which is right near where the Pompidou Center is, and it's also where there's a Jewish community. There's this amazing falafel place called L'As du Falafel, and I think it's in Rue de Rosière. And it's a Jewish community, it's a queer community, and it's a creative community. And it was like being struck by lightning. I thought, wow, this is where I belong. This is my homeland. This is where I've come from. Even if I have no French ancestry, spiritually, this is where I identify. And the realization that I could actually pick and choose, and that it wasn't something that I had necessarily it wasn't something I had taught. I had been taught to identify with. It wasn't something I had been raised to conform with. It really resonated with me, and that was quite liberating. The realization that my character, my lifestyle, myself, it's about listening to what resonates to you, what sparks you, and not what you've been taught or not what you've been led to believe that you should be feeling. So in terms of, from sexuality, from cultural practices, from religious practices, it really, it resonated with me. So that was the first sort of milestone, I suppose. The second epiphany I had was probably maybe a few years into my first serious relationship, which lasted a while. And for the most part, it was a very loving relationship. Unfortunately, as the years went by, there were a few key differences, some that were irreconcilable. But actually, fairly early on in the second year, I recall, my partner was invited to the consecration of my grandmother. And as you can appreciate, the whole process of grief and mourning is very, very particular and quite sacred. The process of quality of life, of cleansing oneself, of paying tribute to the ones that you've lost and renewing yourself. I recall there being a lot of resistance from my partner at the time when he was invited to the consecration. I think there were a number of other factors at play, which probably relates to my sort of third epiphany or my third stage. That the simple, that moment when there was resistance, although over time there would be more of a sort of I suppose, harmony between my partner and my parents and my religious practice. I think then the importance of not necessarily religious understanding, but some kind of cultural compatibility. Pardon me. That was really, it was quite important and quite instructive about who I'd like to spend my life with, and what one values, really. So yes, I mean, that extends to my current, I suppose, relationship with Judaism, in that I don't necessarily believe in the traditional Jewish concept of God. I don't pray. I don't go to synagogue that often, but culturally, spiritually, my sensibility, my humor, my tastes, my values are so intrinsically Jewish. I can't separate that from who I am. So that time in my life was pretty revelatory. Around the same time, though, I was trying to reconcile my queer identity with my parents. My mum came round much quicker than my dad. When I came out to my parents again, I think I came out to them at maybe 13, as I said, and then 19. When I said, I really still think, it's been 6 years. I'm pretty sure I do like men. And then around 23, when I introduced my then partner to my parents. And my mum, as I said, came round fairly quickly. But my dad took longer. It was an issue of pride and understanding. I was still living with my parents at the time, and probably for 3 months, my dad didn't really engage with me. He didn't ignore me. He didn't excommunicate me. He didn't kick me out of the house. But it didn't extend beyond small talk. It was, hello, how are you? Have a good weekend. Have a good week. Okay, stumm. But the moment I realized my dad had finally caught up, was I think a year or so into the relationship, I told my parents I was going over to visit Justin because he was unwell and he had a flu. So I was going to go see him. So I went upstairs, I packed my bag, and then I came down to see my dad defrosting some chicken soup in a pot in the kitchen. And he said to me, just take the chicken soup and go give it to Justin. And the fact that I didn't even need to ask my parents, or it didn't even occur to me. My dad, for him, I guess it was the beginnings of some kind of second nature to him. That's when I thought, okay, this is picking up momentum. My dad is on the same page as me now, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. Just the sight of him defrosting chicken soup, as if it's just it's the natural thing to do. What else? I guess an extension of that with my parents and I, and the sort of intersection of queer and Jewish identities. A few years later, I recall my parents approaching me after Yom Kippur. We attended the same synagogue for many years. The same rabbi who I had known when I was 23, 24, 25, had also led my bar mitzvah service. He had gone up to my parents in private and said to them, I support Ben. What he does in his private life is his choice. He's welcome in my synagogue, but his partner isn't. And then he proceeded to give my parents, I believe, either some details of a psychiatrist or recommended that I go seek psychiatric help. And they then relayed that to me. And I thought, okay, I think my time at the synagogue is done. I think I'm going to go find another congregation. So I went, did a bit of research, and went to join another synagogue. And I think within a year, my parents followed me and my sister did as well. So I guess relating back to what I was saying earlier about it being not realizing that you have the power to choose who you're associated with as a Jew, and that it's not strictly Orthodox. You know, even if you find something, even if you believe that you're committing something that is unorthodox, actually realizing you have the choice to choose is really important. It's an important realization for me. And I suppose the last stage, which is pretty much where I am now, going off the back of realizing that, you know, one has the power to choose, one's Jewish identity and one's queer identity can actually coexist. They don't have to be at odds with each other. I finally, last year, was able to realize what I'd wanted to do for a while. Europe, long desired to live in Berlin. As I was saying to you before, oh, is it okay? For a second, it almost froze. Okay, I'll resume. Sorry. As I was saying to you before, the 20th century was made in Berlin. The Second World War was waged from this city. The biggest head-off between a face-off rather between two ways of conceiving government and community and running countries happened here. And as a result, this city has attracted an enormous variety of people from all walks of life. And I'd always respected the German approach to design and sustainability, their exacting standards. So for me, Berlin was an obvious choice to move here and to have at least an overseas chapter of my life. So I finally packed up my bags and moved to Berlin last year. And I'm really grateful to say that within 14 months, I've got an apartment, I've got new friends, not many, but some friends, quality people. I have a job, I have a partner, a new boyfriend. We've been together for 6 months. His father is Jewish, his mum isn't, so halachically he's not technically Jewish, but there's the curiosity, there's the excitement to learn about Judaism, there's the respect, there's the cultural compatibility, which for me was a huge win. His mother, I believe, is Catholic, so he has an appreciation for a number of religions and cultures coexisting, which I think is where I'm approaching, the attitude that I'm approaching. And it's fantastic. My parents, before Corona, visited me for Rosh Hashanah. We went to synagogue together. We had a Rosh Hashanah meal with one of my friends here. I visited a kosher supermarket before Pesach and showed my partner, Raphael, chicken soup, matzah balls, gefilte fish, horseradish, you can't forget horseradish, pickles, and he loved it. I introduced challah French toast to his friends because obviously challah French toast, there's no other option for choice of bread. And learning again, every time I pass a little gold plaque on the ground in Berlin, being reminded of the history and the steps that I take every day in this city. So I feel like I'm at a place now where I'm comfortable with my Jewish identity, and it's no longer, and I no longer feel like it needs to alienate my queerness, and the other way around as well, for that matter. Yeah, I guess that's where I am, Jared. From within, to my parents, to my family, to my partner, to my community, irrespective of geographic boundaries. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
I want to thank you, Ben, for sharing your story with us. You know, I was madly writing down notes while you were talking, and the way that you speak about being able to choose, about having the power to choose how you embrace your identity, and how you've been able to navigate to a place where every piece of you can coexist. I think that this is something genuinely powerful that will reach out to the Jews who are watching, to our LGBT um, community who are watching. And so thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Jared.
I have one or two questions, if that's okay.
Of course, go for it.
Um, so you were talking about some of the challenges that you faced, either internally or externally. Um, I'll ask this first. Um, so you've spoken a bit about your journey coming out as gay in your Jewish spaces. Have you come out as Jewish in the gay spaces that you inhabit?
That's a really good question. Come out as Jewish in the gay spaces that I inhabit. I can't say I have, at least not in Australia. I think now in Berlin, my Jewishness is just as much, I'm just as conscious of my Jewishness as I am of my queerness. I suppose back in Melbourne, I had a pretty tight-knit circle of friends who I had grown up with through school, and I had some straight friends, some gay friends. It was never really an issue. It was just known and accepted. And then through JAG, that organization, I was able to branch out and make more Jewish gay friends. But only now, when I'm in Berlin, is the Judaism just as present as my queer identity? No, I haven't, but it is something. It's interesting to think about. Yeah, I suppose that's maybe kind of part of my privilege as well, that I haven't actually had to struggle with it. It's been just kind of accepted. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It's thank you so much for that. So as we were talking about before, um, you were describing these struggles that you've had throughout your life, and I just wanted to ask, when you have encountered people with different views, with different life perspectives, and you're having those conversations, what gives you strength in those moments?
That's a really good question, Jared. And not least because this morning, a little over half an hour before, I was having one of those conversations with my father about something he had posted on Facebook about the Black Lives Matter movement. I think you speak about struggles, and I think no more apparent than this year now that the reality that we are all faced with, I guess, the stark contrast of differences between different groups, and trying to reconcile. I think what gives me strength is, first of all, patience. nothing is ever won. I mean, the fact that it's not about a fight or a debate or who wins and who loses to begin with, because at the end of the day, we're all humans on this little blue dot, which is a rock hurtling through space. I mean, we're all in this together. So I suppose what gives me strength is perspective, patience, the realization that we're all just trying to survive. But I was thinking as well, one of the main, I guess the backbone of Judaism and the backbone of many other religions as well is that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You know, be a mensch. This life's too short to not be a mensch, to be a kind person. If there's someone who has a different perspective, yes, some people are more learned than others. Some people need a little bit of help to be shown the way. And if you approach them with humility, with grace, patience, I don't believe, and maybe again, this is my privilege speaking, but I don't believe in my experience that has ever been met with real pushback. That's what gives me strength. The strength that one should approach others who are different to you with humility, with tenderness, with love. I think this spirit has shown me more than ever. You need. I mean, I feel like I'm sprouting like a Beatles ideology of all you need is love. I mean, you need a lot more than love, but love. I feel like there's a love deficit this year. We all need more of it. You know, love towards each other, love towards our environment. Because that's what will sustain us. I mean, God, this sounds so tacky, but you need humility. You need patience, insight, a soft touch. Yeah, that's what gives me strength.
I have one final question for you, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to go back to something that you said close to the beginning. You were talking about being in a psychology appointment with your parent,
Mm-hmm.
and the psychologist looked to you and he said you were normal.
Mm-hmm.
You were heterosexual, therefore you were normal.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about this moment as if it was a life-changing moment, that it helped you navigate your identity at that point. And your future journey was just beginning. So many questions yet to be answered. And all these years later, you know, you're in Berlin, you have a wonderful life, you have this incredible perspective. I just wanted to ask you, Ben, if you had a chance to speak to him, what would you say?
I don't know, probably some wise ass remark like being normal is overrated, or there is no normal, or I don't know, I'd almost probably say thank you. I mean, it was damaging, but at the same time, having pushback against that internally was what prompted a whole lot more, I guess, of internal growth. It was for the years to come. yeah, I don't know what I'd say to him. I'd probably say, all things aside, don't equate heterosexuality with normality, because that's that ain't true. Um, yeah, that's probably what I'd say. I don't even know if he'd be practicing now. Um, yeah.
What would you say to your younger self?
I probably would say it will be okay. Keep the faith. Keep the faith in yourself. Mm, yeah.
I would like to thank you again, Ben, for taking the time to be part of Pride in the Living Room. Before we part ways, do you have any final words?
Uh, Again, thank you, Jared. I'm happy to be part of this initiative. I think you should, yeah, continue pushing it and promoting it. Uh, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Then I guess it's time to say here's to sharing our story in this moment and many more moments in the future. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ben.